Hello and welcome to Evangebros, your podcast about biblical literacy, discipleship, and historical/cultural context. I'm your co-host, George Benson.
I'm your other co-host, Don Sheaver.
And we're actually in person talking.
We are. We're live.
Yes. We're live for later radio.
Oh man, it's like we're living in the future. Or in the past.
Wait,
how does that work?
Yes and.
Okay. All right, well, hi future people listening.
Hi. So we don't really have an agenda for this episode, which you could say that from most of our episodes. Like there's a sometimes topic that we'll go with.
Yeah, I feel like we just have been suckering these people along for a while now.
We're just in it for the money.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Which is a great segue to apologize to our Patreon supporters for the inconsistent live episodes?
Yeah, probably.
Anyway, so Don, we are wrapping up Advent. Christmas
we aren't.
Yeah, we are not.
The calendar is.
Yes. This episode is coming out on Christmas Day.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Merry Christmas.
And honestly, let's just be truthful, folks. You should not be listening to this on Christmas Day. You probably have better things to do. So you're probably listening to this sometime after Christmas. So
yeah,
enjoy the new year.
Absolutely. So you will be teaching this upcoming Sunday on
Hope. Yeah, we didn't do. I don't think that's the proper order. We kind of did ours a little bit differently at Dust this year. We did. We had 4 different people, myself included, so 3 other people that each represented different intersectionality, and so everyone had an opportunity to choose which Advent topic and which week they wanted to go. So we didn't do the order, but this week I get the honor of talking about hope.
So did you choose to talk about hope, or
was it was the leftover?
Was it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So evidently the other people didn't think that there was anything to talk about with hope.
That's fair. So how are you feeling about that?
Hopeful. See what I did there?
I did.
Yeah. It's kind of obvious.
Yeah. But seriously, because, you've not been secretive about your health issues. And, I don't know what's been, personally, I've been having a hard time getting into the spirit of this Christmas season, which normally I'm like Clark Griswold from Christmas Vacation. I'm all about this. And this year, I don't know what happens sometime in early November. I just want to fast forward through to January 1st.
Well, I mean, you're dressed up like an elf right now. It really kind of says the opposite of what you just said.
Yeah, but they couldn't see that, so thanks for giving that away.
Yeah, it's the curly toed shoes thing with the bells.
Yeah, well,
it's interesting because I think we put hope in the wrong things. And because of that, it's easy to lose focus of what we should be hopeful for, right? So like, I think we still have a little bit of entitlement. I know that's shocking, that we should have like this nice frosting of white snow, that politics should be kind and generous, and that the world should not be abusive, oppressive, and angry, and all of this expectation that should have all been figured out for us. And because of that, we look at what's going on in our current climate, and literally the climate, and we don't feel hopeful. And the truth is, in my opinion at least, is that that's kind of putting hope in the wrong places. And I'm not going like super spiritual religious here, that our hope is in Jesus and none of that matters. But when we put our hope in things that we have no direct strength to reverse or overcome, then it's more like wishing than it is hope, right? I feel like when we talk about hope, we should be talking about So, like in the epistles, there's the passage that says, "Be prepared with an answer for the hope that you have." Right? I don't think it's this mystical hope that is outside of our contribution. And so I think that hope comes from participation, not from witnessing something, right? And I think in a lot of ways, we're sitting back witnessing all this unhealth and distress that the world is going through, the politics and climate change, racism, queerphobia, Islamophobia, all those things. And we look at it and we feel overwhelmed by the amount of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And what I would argue is that hope comes instead in our action towards subverting that, right? It's in the individual actions that actively subvert oppression, that actively subvert climate change, that actively subvert, and that is where we can find our hope, is that we can participate. We can't necessarily dictate the outcome on our own, but each of us individually can bring some amount of life or light or contribution to each thing, and it's in that illumination that and the combining illuminations with other people who are also bringing their small amount of light to the darkness that hope swells. And for me, I think that's just really important. And I think we look, this is one of the situations in which, we definitely have hammered here on this podcast about the idea that the, scripture's not individual, it's corporate.
Yeah.
But this hope is something that I think lies within the locking of arms corporately, but begins individually. Like a community doesn't have hope unless individuals within that community have hope. And so it's that building, that snowball effect, if you will,
yeah,
of hope that happens.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I've been a part of churches that want to try and affect social change, and it's not a church that's about that. I mean, you can have churches that are about that or communities that are about that, but if individuals aren't getting the ball rolling on that, it doesn't matter if that's what they're about.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah, okay. That's a great way of describing. So I haven't felt anything, but I still have been trying to describe how I do have this hope about, I almost say it like a joke sometimes, surprise, surprise, but it's true. Like, I live in the hope of the redemption of all things.
Mm-hmm.
And that hope is an active choice, because if I believe that this is happening, and that's why I love the Advent season, like the arrival of the Christ child, or however you want to put it, it's me actively choosing to participate in that hope. The hope is already here. Mm-hmm. It's just a nice reminder that it's something that we can still anticipate. So even though I'm not feeling anything, or not feeling excited about the season that I normally love, I still am trying to choose in that hope of that even though it might not be present in my life at the moment, I can help bring it to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I think it's important, right? I think the difference between the segment of Christendom that would say that their hope is in the return of Messiah, versus what you said about the hope in the redemption of all things. A lot of times, I would argue they've confused this notion of an escape pod, mm-hmm. or a lifeboat,
okay,
for hope. Well, that's not hopeful. That means that you're just assuming the boat's sinking.
Yeah, we're trying to get out of here to something,
and you've survived.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't necessarily say that that's hopeful as much as that's abandoning ship. That's getting out while the getting's good. Whereas hope is this notion of participation, right? Like the hopeful people, if you think about like, I don't know enough about the Titanic, but if you think about like a sinking ship, right? The people that have hope are the ones that are actually going and waking people up, making sure people are safe, and they're hopeful that these people will be saved.
Yeah.
They might even be repairing, as quickly as possible the hull, trying to actually preserve the boat and therefore save lives. And I think that is the action of hope. Whereas the people who at first sound of the boat sinking are scrambling towards the lifeboats, I don't know that I would categorize that in the same way. I know that we would use the word hope there.
Yeah.
Like that they had hope that they could survive by getting on a lifeboat. And I know we would use that word. But I think when I'm thinking about theological concepts, I think of it in much bigger terms than survival of the fittest. And instead think about it in terms of servitude of the fittest, right? Like that we are striving to see this thing through. That instead of abandoning the earth, we are trying to be a part of the redemption of the earth.
Oh my God. I've been thinking, oh yeah. Okay. So I don't know if this it ties into what you just said. I don't know if it ties into the larger whole. Maybe it does. So Jeff Bezos, who has...
He has like a mom and pop shop, right?
Yeah. It's named after a river in Egypt.
Oh, the Nile.
Yep, that's it. Well, and please correct me if I'm wrong, listeners. He's funneling part of his money into a space program instead of paying his taxes. Whatever. Anyway, and you've got Elon Musk doing the same thing, trying to start colonies on Mars, and so it's like,
I have a quick question about that.
Yeah.
So will this Space Force be like will the first thing that they do is give a ticket to Elon Musk's convertible? Like they'll be like the space meter maids?
Honestly, if that's what it does,
I'm for it.
I'm kind of for it too.
All right, sorry. So Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos.
So you've got people,
and even the guy from Virgin.
Yeah. Whatever. Yes. So you have people who have resources to help fix what's going on in the world. But instead, they're funneling resources into leaving the world.
Right, because they don't believe in redemption. They believe in, this isn't fair. So I'm still gonna say it the way I want to say it, but I don't think it's a fair statement. They don't believe in redemption. They believe in being a creator.
Yes.
So
holy shit. Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
No, I it's just like I think about, I've got a group of friends that
don't lie.
I've got a few friends who I've been playing a form of Dungeons and Dragons with for almost 5 years now. And we talk about sci-fi nerdy stuff, and terraforming comes up, not pretty regularly, but every now and again. And I just keep thinking, how messed up of a concept is this, where we want to terraform a planet just to rebuild resources that we currently have here that we're not trying to preserve or do anything about.
Right.
There was a great Onion article that came out a couple weeks ago, maybe, that South American country freaks out finding wealth of natural resources to try and hide from the West.
Right.
Like, and the idea being that we'll come in and pillage the land for that.
Sure. We are the locusts.
Oh my God. Yeah. So this stuff is going on, and I sometimes feel like people that carry the mantle of Christian, at best, we're pretty crazy. I like on paper, some of the shit that we think makes no sense. And anyway, so like to to continue to choose hope and to be active in that when we see everything going on around us.
Yeah.
Is so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's been part of the funk that I've been in this season is just like,
Yeah. Well, last year when I talked about hope, and I might have mentioned it on the podcast, I'm not certain, but it's been a year and hopefully people have forgotten if it has been. But when Jesus was born into this world, mm-hmm. right? If he is the hope of the world, as we tend to imagine, right, as members of the Christian community, his birth didn't eradicate evil. His birth didn't eradicate, nor did his death.
No, nor his resurrection.
Right. Did not eradicate evil, did not eradicate darkness. Instead, as I explained to our community, that Jesus provided a prick of light in the midst of a dark night, right? And then invited each of us along to also become pricks of light in that darkness, right? Which, of course, then someone in our church came up with a T-shirt that said, be a prick of hope or something like that. Yeah. So
sounds on brand.
Yeah. So, but this picture really is this idea of we're each contributing. We each pierce the darkness. Yeah. And as we pierce the darkness more and more, our individual prick of light might not seem like much, but it's hopeful to see, like whether you're in a tunnel and you see the light at the end of the tunnel and just that small dot of light brings hope. And that is what our role is in this world. Our role is to be that light in those places, right? Whether it's the light on a hill and all of that stuff, right? You don't hide under a bushel, blah, 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 right? But this picture of us taking what we believe the world should be based on how we read the scriptures and then living that in such a way that creates these spots of light, whether it's you're thinking about like laying out in a field and looking up at the stars. Yeah. Right. I don't know about you, but I don't know many people that can do that and not experience some level of awe and wonder and maybe even hope. Yeah. Right. And so that's our role. Our role isn't to change the night sky to daylight. Our role is to pierce the darkness in every opportunity that we have. And I find that to be something that's very doable. If you have a completely black sky, maybe let's do it this way. What is the toy from like the 70s and 80s? Light Bright. Yeah, right. And if you take that black sheet and you poke that one light bulb into it or that one piece of plastic in it that allows the light to come through, it's obvious, right? Like it sticks out. The same thing's true with the night sky. If you were ever to look at a pitch black night sky, not because it's cloudy or overcast, right? But instead just it's a pitch black sky and there was one star visible, it would be extremely noticeable. In fact, I would argue you'd be quicker to notice that than the utter darkness, right? Which is so fascinating that one small prick of light can attract all the attention from all the surrounding darkness. And to me, that's where I think we as members of the faithful have gotten out of, maybe, I don't want to say out of line, but maybe out of sorts, is that we're trying to eradicate the darkness in the sky instead of adding more light. And I think that that's our role. I think that if all the faithful were to be that piercing light in the sky, that eventually, we could overcome the darkness, right? But I don't think our role is to just wait for the sun to rise. No pun intended on how you spell that, right?
Yeah. You were talking, and I was just thinking of the opening of Genesis. God said, "Let there be light," and there is light, and the darkness is there present with that. the light doesn't eradicate. I mean, the sun's not even made until a couple of days later. So
Right.
it's just, yeah, no, it's, and I think that I definitely get caught up in that, the idea of wanting to completely eradicate the darkness.
Yeah, I think most people do.
Yeah, like,
Which is why so many of my friends that are into politics that are opposed to Trump feel so hopeless right now because they imagine the only way for there to be hope is for him to be gone. And in my opinion, that's given way too much power to this person.
yeah,
And that's giving him the authority that he wants. And I think that the church, the faithful, and I realize that white evangelicalism is a huge reason, if not the reason, that Trump is in office to begin with. But I think that the church that, Christianity Today just released an article saying that he should be booted, which was convenient because the editor is retiring in 2 weeks.
huh, weird.
So it's a pretty safe article to write, I guess. But, it isn't, our job is to, obviously through voting and everything else, make our opinions heard. But we shouldn't allow corruptness and evil and wickedness, regardless of what station they hold in the world, to steal our hope. Like that's sad. That's sad that our hope is in a political office.
Yeah.
It's sad that our hope is in energy reform. Now, don't get me wrong, it scares me. I have a 16-year-old son, and it scares me what kind of future he might face if we don't do something about climate change.
Yeah.
That scares me. But I remember I don't personally remember during the Cold War, but during the Cold War, people were building nuclear bunkers, assuming that the nuclear end was coming any day.
Yeah.
So they lived in a different sort of fear of the end of all things. And I don't know. I just feel like it's so hard to talk about, right? Because I don't want to dismiss the weight of those things. Those things are heavy, and those things are complicated, and we need to do whatever we can to stand up against them. But we should not, and we shall not, allow that to define hope.
Yeah.
It's not. Hope is you and I's individual spark, and I don't want to get all like Gnostic here, but like
No, get a little Gnostic. It's fine.
It's our individual spark of light in this world
Yeah.
that will bring hope. Like I can bring hope to my neighbor that it doesn't matter who the president of the United States is. I can bring hope to my community. It doesn't matter what the climate realities are. And I feel like in some ways we're exhausted and we're tired and we've forgotten that we still are hope. Like we don't necessarily have hope, right? Like it's not about having hope. It's that we are hope. Like Jesus was hope.
Yeah.
Not Jesus had hope. Like we need to change that. We need to change our language. Like we are hope. People are hope. So anyhow, I'm preaching now.
No, that's fine. I'm just I mean, it's a broad topic. But you were talking about you don't want to dismiss the weight of climate change and everything going on politically.
Of course, it worries me all the time.
No, absolutely, but like I'm trying to think about the weight of that and how if there's a difference between right now I am just like trying to just get through right now,
right?
Because of there's personal stuff going on. There's whatever. Anyway, but I still have this idea of what hope is, but I'm also paralyzed in the shit of the weight, like the weight of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
So, you know, I feel shame is something that I feel strongly. You know, I go into shame cycles when I'm not in a healthy spot. Unfortunately, that's not happening right now. But it's just, you know, I think about how the shame cycle perpetuates this hopelessness, or the sense of hopelessness, because I can't do X, Y, or Z. Yet I'm still trying to, in some cases, convince myself that there is hope. Not only that I have it, but that I will one day continue to actively be a part of that. And so, like, I definitely get where you're coming from, but at the same time, it's just like, you know, well, when the weight of this shit is getting me down,
right? Well, this is where we have that, and I'm sure you've heard this saying, I want to stop just surviving and begin thriving.
I've never heard that, but that sounds, yeah.
Right. So, you know, you can't thrive when you're just trying to survive. And I think that plays into a little bit of this topic of hope, right? Is that for many people, they're in survival mode.
Yeah. And
when you're in the midst of survival mode, surviving is the hope.
Yeah.
Right. But as a whole, as the human race, we've been fighting for survival since our inception.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's been the story of humanity. Now, I think some of it is our arrogance to think that we've overcome it and that we now sit atop the food and nature chain.
Yeah.
And so therefore we will win. And now when nature is fighting back, we're not used to that position, right? But the human race has been living in survival mode for its existence. That shouldn't remove hope. Like, think about, Jesus is born into a setting where Israel is occupied by Rome. There are, you know, crucified people lining the roads, right? That, you know, Holocaust level murders of Jewish people and other peoples by Rome for being disobedient, and yet in the midst of that, while Israel is trying to survive, Jesus is hope.
Yeah.
Right? And if you noticed, his hope isn't failed, at least according to the story, because he dies and Israel is still being occupied. Because hope wasn't about there not being survival. Hope was something more transcendent than that. Hope was something that in the midst of all the chaos, you can still find light. You can still find that glimmer of redemption. You can still find, I think about, you know, Paul, shipwrecked, beaten, thrown off a cliff, imprisoned, right? Yet always seemed to have joy and hope at his ready. And it wasn't because he had it all, right? That the world was at his feet.
Yeah.
It was instead, in the midst of all the chaos, the one thing that cannot be stolen from us, if we choose, is hope.
Yeah, okay, so you made a good point with Paul, which is not something I normally say.
About me or about Paul?
In general.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, I should say to most people. But so you brought up joy and hope, and I think, I mean, personally, because I can't speak to everybody, something I may have forgotten is that I confuse both of those as the same thing. When I am joyful, I feel hopeful.
Sure. Yes. I think that is absolutely. I think people perceive that if you don't have joy, you can't have hope.
Yeah.
Right? So when you asked me earlier about with my health.
Yeah.
Right? I would say that, you know, it's I still feel hope in the sense of that I can still be a light in the darkness. I don't know that I would use the word hope in the term of I'm hopeful that I'll get a diagnosis that allows me to return to, you know, the way I was prior.
Yeah.
Now, as someone dealing with that, it's easy to confuse those two, right? It's easy to say, I've lost hope.
Yeah.
Right? But I would say my life doesn't reflect that I've lost hope. I still do the podcast. I still disciple people.
Yeah.
I still teach on Sundays at church. And what it is that, again, we confuse things that are out of our hands with hope. Right? The things that I can control, I inject with hope.
Yeah.
The things that I can't control, I am left to find where hope lies within the midst of that, even if it isn't solving it. And I think that's what we do. We imagine it's only solution based, right? So I can have hope if the climate gets fixed.
Yeah.
I can have hope if the impeachment leads to removal. I can have hope if, and the truth is, hope withstands all those things.
Yeah. Hope, because hope isn't transactional.
Yeah. And it's also not solution.
Yeah.
It's not solving the problems. It's lighting the way in the midst of problems, right? Hope is the light, the moonlight on a dark trail that allows you to keep your footing, right? It's not that the trail gets smooth or that the woods all of a sudden illuminate. It's that there is enough light for you to navigate the treacherous walk. Like, that's hope. And so how do we illuminate people's paths? How do we, you and I, members of the faithful, live in such a way that the things that we can impact by our presence, by our affluence, by our time, by our energy, how are we participating in making paths more navigatable?
Easier to navigate.
Yeah, we'll go with that. So that's where I feel hope is. And I wish I could say that, you know, I have hope that we won't have 4 more years of our current political situation.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't use that word for that, right? I wouldn't say hope. I would say I'd be disappointed if we continued down this path without better lighting. And so, you know, this is where, even think about the way we argue with people or debate with people. We don't debate or argue with hope.
Say more on that.
Like, we're not attempting to illuminate a path in order for that person to be able to better see. And this goes both directions, right? Mm-hmm. Instead, we're trying to convince them they're on the wrong path. And I don't think that that's helpful. I think that that's combative. That's, that's mixing some things that aren't healthy. I find that the best way that I can communicate with someone that I'm in disagreement with is appreciating how they ended up on the path that they're on. Appreciating the complications that they face in traversing that path. Their determination to continue down that path. And then, if I'm fortunate enough to be able to, in some way, walk with them a brief distance, and even possibly to illuminate some of the path to make the traveling a little bit easier. But it's up to them if they use that illumination to get on to something else, mm-hmm. or if they just use that illumination to better navigate, maybe more healthily, where they're heading. And I realize metaphors fall apart, and I'm probably, have taken this one beyond where it should go. But I think that even in our conversations, we need to be more hopeful.
No, I don't think that you took that too far. I mean, I think there's always the balance of engaging with somebody who is a part of actively harming others.
Certainly.
Which I don't think that you came across saying that I lost the trail on that one.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that we, like, someone that's actively harming someone else. It's not about,
You're not going to light their path and show them why they're wrong. Like, it's...
Well, I think it all depends on the power dynamics in the conversation, right? This is where there's no blanket response to any of this. If the power dynamics are such that I think that because of my stature in our community, and I don't mean that in any grandiose way, that I'm more likely to have someone who I disagree with at least value my perspective a little bit more than some other people that they disagree with.
Yeah.
And because of that, I hold a little bit of power there. The power dynamic has shifted to me. And I think because of that, I'm able to help them in a way that someone who they hold power over shouldn't be responsible to do.
Got it.
Right? So if I have, either because of equality or because of a social dynamic that gives me equal power or authority or more, I think I can engage conversations a little bit differently, or should engage conversations a little bit differently than someone who actually is coming from lower station of power, right? Like, they don't have to try and be kind and make sure that the person's okay and safe in the way they walk. They can choose to do that, but that's not an obligation on them. They can just do, whatever they need to survive. And this goes back to the difference of survival versus hope, right? So, I think that for me, what's important isn't that we coddle someone, but I think we make a mistake. You mentioned the idea of someone that's causing harm. Look, let's just be honest. The drone kills that Obama allowed.
Absolutely.
Like, there's deaths on the doorstep of Obama's presidency that I can't condone.
Yeah.
And we can't just imagine that Trump is evil and Obama is not, or Obama is evil and Trump is not. They both have had to make very complicated decisions. And I'm not pulling the whole, there are fine people on both sides, right? Where I get concerned is we vilify the people that support them instead of the person themselves, right? Like, if you are upset that people support Trump, do you feel like people should be upset that you supported Obama because Obama killed people, allowed drone strikes that killed innocent people? Do you think that you are in some way evil because you, and I don't know this to be true about you, I'm just speaking in general,
No.
that you would hold Obama up as one of the best presidents we've ever had, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I get concerned, is that we take the morality of the president or the office and place it on the voters. And I become concerned about that. I think that there are times that we need to hold people accountable. And it kind of reminds me of Christianity Today, where, the magazine article we referenced earlier that we'll say we'll put in the show notes, but we won't.
Yeah.
Is, how can you, as a Christian, support this, not condemn this, and yet had condemned Bill Clinton?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the clip of Senator Graham that's going around talking about when a president must answer a subpoena.
Right.
And now, yes, yeah.
Right. And so I think that where I get concerned is we're too quick to label people as evil or harm doers.
Oh, I would completely agree. I mean, this is part of a larger conversation that we've touched on quite a bit. Like, nuance is incredibly important in these conversations, which is why blanket statements and aspects of call-out culture are harmful to progression.
Yeah.
But this is where hope comes in.
Yeah, and the question is, how are you going to spend, like, if we think of ourselves like a flashlight, right, that eventually the light's going to dim out and go out, right, because we all die.
Yeah.
What are you going to spend your life illuminating, right? What is it that you're going to use? Are you going to be a spotlight that points out all the horrible things in people? Or are you going to be a lighthouse that seeks the well-being of all of the sojourners and passerbys, right? We have a choice how we use that. And I think it's really important. And I think too often, my experience in Christendom has been that we'd rather be a spotlight that points at all the people, like we're like the guard shack lights that want to just point at the inmates and, make perceived safety by keeping them in the light. And instead, I want to be a beacon. Yeah. And I think that's what hope is.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the lighthouse, and this touches back on an earlier conversation we had about salvation and providing safety.
Yeah.
So are we going to spend our time in our light, like a lighthouse, providing salvation?
Yeah.
Or are we going to continue to be spotlights? No, I think that's an excellent place to wrap up.
Good. I just want to add, this was, very much off the cuff, right?
Yes.
I appreciate this because this is helping me form my teaching for this coming Sunday. So I'm glad this is coming out after my teaching.
Me too.
But I'd also say that there's some of this that I would probably revise when I sit down and work out my teaching.
Yeah.
There's some points in this that I think that I would either pull back a little bit, scrub up a little bit. So what you really got today is kind of my process of thinking through something out loud. So I'm grateful, George, for you asking the question. I'm grateful for our listeners to listen and hear. And I would be ecstatic if you could message me in the past before my teaching this Sunday, which will be a few days before this comes out, so you can help me refine this teaching would be fantastic.
So, yeah. So get on that, everybody.
Please. It would be helpful.
So I think what we're going to do with the podcast as a whole, though, is come back after New Year, probably the second week of January.
Sounds good.
Again, we're going to continue to try and do the weekly stuff, but we'll have there will be a post coming up about what the future of this looks like.
I think we do the best job of keeping people up to date on Facebook is probably our most consistent. Is that fair?
I think that is very fair. So if you haven't already, like us on Facebook, check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Evangebros. And also shoot us an email, evangebros@gmail.com. And like I said in that awful joke at the beginning, we are also on Patreon, which does get updated. So a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm your co-host, George.
I'm your other co-host, Don.
Have a great holiday.
Yes. Enjoy your Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year. And I think that's all that's falling in that immediate time. But I might be wrong that there's another celebration, Saturnalis.
Kwanzaa?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But blessings to everyone. And go be a prick.
Yeah.
Of light. Of hope. All right, friends. Bye.